Trump and the NATO Secretary General speaking there in the Oval Office, taking some questions on the White House renovations, U.S. boat strikes against individuals in the Caribbean, notably making some news on Russia and Ukraine. CNN's Kristen Holmes is at the White House. Matthew Chance is in Moscow for us. And Kristen, President Trump just mentioned new sanctions on Russia. He said he canceled the meeting with Putin because it just didn't feel right. He also expressed frustration that Putin would say something to him and then it wouldn't actually happen in terms of a cessation of hostilities.
Yeah, and Jake, just to reiterate why this is so remarkable in this moment is that he's been saying this kind of back and forth for months now, where he talks about Putin, he says he wants to end the war, which he also actually did say just now, but then grows frustrated, says that maybe he will give tomahawks to Ukraine, maybe he will impose sanctions, but this is the first time we're seeing him actually go through with this step. The Treasury Department posting about these, imposing sanctions on Russia's two largest oil companies. And these are not just secondary tariffs, which was the original threat, that it was going to be sanctions on countries like China or India who buy their oil from Russia. No, he is actually sanctioning the Russian oil companies. He's saying that he hopes that this helps Putin come to his senses, that it helps him be reasonable. Now, it's still unclear why he says he believes that Putin wants an end to this war. But I do want to note one other part of this that was pretty striking, because it's the first time that he's acknowledged that he told Zelensky that he would not be giving him those Tomahawk missiles, those long-range missiles into Russia, saying here that it would be a minimum of 6 months to train somebody on how to actually use those missiles, saying the only way that we could actually utilize them would be for the United States to shoot them, and that was not something the United States was going to do. This has obviously been a point of contention and was a huge point of contention in the meeting last Friday between the Ukrainian president and President Trump, to the point where White House officials were not giving details about what happened in that meeting, other than some officials telling me on background that it was very tense and at times uncomfortable. So this is really the first time we've seen him take action on Russia. We've seen him threaten time and time again. Now he's actually gone through with it.
And Matthew, President Trump also reiterated that he thinks Russian leader Vladimir Putin wants peace. What are Russian officials saying about this proposed summit between the president and Putin in Budapest? And do you think these sanctions will change Putin's calculation in any way?
Well, Jake, first of all, there's no question that Vladimir Putin wants peace. He wants an end to this war. The problem is he wants an end to the war on his terms. So he wants all of the territory that is demanded, the 4 regions of Ukraine, including all of the Donbass. And he wants a certain amount of control over the foreign policy of Ukraine in the future. And so it's a negotiation for what the terms of that peace are. I mean, certainly when it comes to the face-to-face meeting that was proposed a few days ago now, was it, by President Trump in Budapest, the Russians have been very positive about it. I mean, they've got nothing to lose. I mean, every time Putin stands on the same stage as Donald Trump, as President Trump, it's a diplomatic win for him, because he can argue, he can show his own people, he can show the world that Russia's diplomatic isolation is over, or it's not real. And so obviously he's going to go for a diplomatic meeting. The question is whether, President Trump, and this is the question that is now being answered, is President Trump going to do something like he did in Alaska, where he rolled out the red carpet? I was there, I saw this, as were you, and got virtually nothing in return from President Putin. It seems that now the White House has reassessed that position. They're putting some pressure on Putin by sanctioning the 2 biggest oil companies in the country. Oil, of course, is the most part of Russia's economy. It's the lifeblood of the Russian war in Ukraine. It's what supplies all the cash for it. The other question about whether that will have any impact, well, it's certainly going to have an impact, but Russia has a track record of finding ways to get around sanctions. We don't know specifically what's being sanctioned, or at least I don't know specifically what's being sanctioned in these latest measures. But Russia is one of the most sanctioned countries in the world, and it finds a way of making it work. And so, in the past, excuse me, sanctions have not changed policy. And they may not change policy on this occasion either, Jake.
President Trump announcing moments ago that he has officially scrapped his summit with Russian leader Vladimir Putin. Remember, it has been 2 months since the U.S. Literally and figuratively rolled out the red carpet for Russian leader Vladimir Putin in Anchorage, Alaska. We continue to see the Russian leader ignore President Trump's attempts to get a ceasefire. Ukrainian President Zelensky warned that Russia's massive attack on Ukraine today shows that Russia is not feeling sufficient pressure to take any steps to end the war. Ukrainian officials say the wide-scale drone, missile, and fighter jet attacks killed 6 people, destroyed homes, knocked out power. Children were carried out of a kindergarten in Kharkiv after a Russian drone severely damaged the building, according to Zelensky. Zelensky says 1 person died there, and the children were taken to shelters. In Kyiv, at least 2 people were killed. 10 had to be rescued after drones bombarded a 16-story building. In the Kyiv suburb of Brovary, a woman and her 6-month-old daughter and her 12-year-old niece were killed after Russian strikes engulfed their house in flames. Joining us now from the southern Ukrainian city of Kryvyi Rih, Aidan Stretch. Aidan is a writer for the Free Press. Aidan, obviously this war is taking a toll on virtually every Ukrainian, but specifically the cost when it comes to children is just horrific. A baby and a 12-year-old were the victims of last night's Russian strikes. A kindergarten was hit. There are an estimated tens of thousands of Ukrainian children who have been essentially kidnapped by Russia. Tell us more about what you're learning about these kids.
It's great to be with you, Jake. And you're right, there's about 35,000 Ukrainian children currently being held in Russia. That's the upper bound estimate. And there's been an extremely effective lobbying campaign on behalf of the Ukrainian government to engage foreign partners on this issue, not only American counterparts, but foreign ministries in South Africa, Qatar, the Vatican, to negotiate on this issue. The problem is, though, according to the people working closest on this matter, is that it's one thing to galvanize international support about these children. It's another to actually locate and bring them home. And that's becoming an increasingly challenging issue for several reasons. The first is that when we're talking about the kidnapped Ukrainian children in Russia, there's really 3 different groups. One is orphans, or people who were held in Ukrainian orphanages who have now been transferred to Russian equivalent state-owned facilities. There's also Ukrainian children who are now in re-education or indoctrination camps across Russia. And then the third group is Ukrainian children who have been militarized and are now undergoing Russian military training. And so getting a hold of and siphoning through all of this data and understanding which group different children made it into Russia through is an extremely challenging problem for the Ukrainian government and its counterparts.
As you know, the First Lady, Melania Trump, has been focusing on this. She recently secured the release of 8 Ukrainian children by working directly with Vladimir Putin. But she didn't mention anything about them being abducted. Rather, she used terms like displaced. The executive director of the Yale Research Lab says, while it's great that the First Lady is so focused on this, quote, it is 35,000 kids, not 7 or 8. It is kids who were taken as a war crime and kids who are being militarized and were abducted by a state, not lost in the war. Language matters, unquote. I would imagine, I can't speak for the First Lady, I would imagine maybe she's using diplomatic language because she's trying to get more kids released. What do Ukrainians think of Melania's involvement, and what do you think about the language she uses?
It's an extremely delicate issue here because you have, on the one hand, Melania Trump's diplomatic channel with Vladimir Putin. You also have a bill introduced to the U.S. Congress that calls on Ukrainian abducted children being returned to their home as any component of a viable ceasefire. And so I think what you're seeing with the difference between Melania Trump's language and congressional Republicans and where Ukrainians are at on this issue is that they want this to be very central to a ceasefire effort, even if it comes at the cost of Trump's efforts to bring Vladimir Putin to the table. And so there's definitely a bit of a disconnect that you're seeing here between Ukrainian officials that have lobbied not only congressmen in the United States, but Christian evangelical organizations, and then the White House, which has its own negotiating strategy.
So Volodymyr Zelensky discussed his conversations with Trump about freezing the front lines where they are, and obviously that's very controversial, as you know. What do Ukrainians think about where the border should be?
So right now, the most recent statistics that we have are that 69% of Ukrainians favor a immediate ceasefire, maybe along the lines that you're describing, but some sort of negotiated settlement. That's up from 22% from when this war first began. Now, when I put that statistic in front of Ukrainian officials, soldiers, civilians, the response is always the same, which is, of course, we want an end to the bloodshed. We want an end to this war, but not on Vladimir Putin's terms, such that he would regroup, rearm, and reinvade again. And so the trouble that they see is a negotiated end to the settlement that doesn't involve pressuring Vladimir Putin more than Trump already has.
Aidan Stretch with the Free Press in Ukraine. Thank you so much.